My name is Julie. I'm sitting in my small, quiet one-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city, looking at my phone. There's a text from Mark, asking if I want to come get the new car I bought. It's been 5 months since I left our shared home, and this simple message brings back a flood of memories. It all started on a fateful Saturday morning. I had been saving for months to buy a new car. It wasn't a flashy luxury vehicle, just a reliable sedan with clean lines and good safety ratings. It was a practical choice for the life Mark and I were supposed to be building together. I remember pulling into the driveway around 11 a.m. Mark was already outside, leaning against the porch railing, a cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. When he heard the engine, he looked up. I felt a surge of pride. I was proud of myself for handling this adult, responsible task, and I thought I didn't need his validation to feel good about it. I stepped out of the car, the keys still warm in my palm. "What do you think?" I asked him. He walked around the car slowly, with no smile, no congratulations. After a long pause, he said, "It's fine, just fine." Then he shrugged and casually mentioned, "My ex drove a better brand at 24. I was stunned. His words felt like a punch in the gut. He continued, sipping his coffee, "You're 36. I expected something more impressive. The word impressive echoed in my head. I calmly handed him the keys and said, "You should keep them since I clearly made the wrong choice." He laughed and told me not to be dramatic, saying he was just comparing. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the car. It was about the pattern of him constantly comparing me to his ex. I walked inside without saying another word. I sat in my home office for 20 minutes, replaying all the small comments he'd made over the past year. How his ex was more adventurous, how she had a better career, how she would have loved our vacations. These comments were always framed as harmless observations, but they were enough to make me feel like I was constantly being measured. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder I'd been organizing for 3 months. It contained legal documents, notes, and options. I slid out a sealed envelope that I'd already made a decision about. When I went downstairs, Mark was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I placed the envelope on the shelf beside his beloved guitar and said, "Something you should read when you're ready." Then I grabbed my bag, charger, and the keys to my old car. I left, not to punish him, but because I was done losing to a woman who wasn't even in the room. I checked into a hotel 30 minutes away. It was far enough to breathe without his presence, but not so far that I felt like I was running away. I sent him a text, taking some space. "Read the envelope. We'll talk after." Then I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I ordered room service, took a shower, and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for the guilt to come. But it never did. Instead, my phone started vibrating. By the end of the first hour, I had 17 missed calls and a bunch of texts. "What is this about? Are you seriously this upset over a car comment?" "I was joking, Julie. Call me back. This is ridiculous." I didn't respond. At around 8 p.m. My curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone over. There were 32 missed calls and a new message, "We need to talk." I waited 10 minutes before replying. I said we'd talk after. Him, after what? You can't just leave separation papers and disappear. I can, and I did. I imagined him pacing the living room, reading the words in the envelope. He texted back, saying I was overreacting and that he never meant to make me feel that way. But I knew the truth. He'd been comparing me to his ex for a year, and I was finally listening. The next morning, his mother called. "What's going on?" "He was up all night." "You left papers on the shelf?" she asked. I told her it wasn't about the car. She sighed and said he didn't mean anything by his comments. I replied quietly, "That's the problem. He does." She tried to convince me that relationships take work and that 7 years shouldn't be thrown away over a few comments. But I told her I wasn't throwing anything away, I was just acknowledging what was already broken. My own mother also called. I told her I was acting like myself for the first time in a long time. When I repeated Mark's comment, she admitted it wasn't great. I explained that it wasn't the first time, just the last. She asked about the envelope, and I told her it was for a 6-month separation, with separate spaces, separate finances, and therapy only if we both chose it. She said I was very prepared, and I told her I'd been thinking about it for months and that I'd just stopped pretending. She finally said she'd support me, whatever I decided. Mark called me, asking me to come home. But I told him I wanted to know if he actually wanted me, or if he was just comfortable with the relationship. He accused me of being unfair, but I reminded him that he'd compared me to his ex again. When he denied it, I told him I'd kept a list. I told him there were 17 instances in 8 weeks, with dates, quotes, and context. He said it was insane, but I told him it was evidence, and that's why I wasn't coming home. The next day, his lawyer contacted me. They wanted me to return home in exchange for counseling and skip the separation. I refused. I knew that if I went back now, it would just be another apology that would fade away once things got comfortable again. Mark's sister came to the hotel. She was angry and said I was being cruel. She told me Mark was a mess and that I couldn't just leave like this. I told her I left with clarity, that I was protecting myself. She scoffed at the idea that his comments meant anything, but I knew they did. She tried to convince me that relationships weren't perfect and that everyone compared sometimes, but I told her this wasn't about insecurity. It was about being constantly told that I fell short of someone who wasn't even there. That night, Mark called again. He promised to stop comparing me to his ex, but I told him promising to stop wasn't the same as understanding why he did it. He insisted that I was enough, but I asked him why he kept using his ex as a measuring stick. He didn't answer. It took 3 full months for Mark to agree to counseling. It wasn't because he suddenly understood the damage he'd done, but because the separation started to feel permanent. In the first counseling session, the therapist asked us why we were there. Mark talked about his fear of losing me and how everything had spiraled out of control. When the therapist asked me why I left, I didn't hesitate. Because I spent a year being compared to someone who doesn't exist anymore, and I stopped recognizing myself while trying to measure up, I said. The therapist asked Mark if he'd compared me to his ex. He shifted in his seat and said it wasn't intentional. When she asked how often, he said he didn't know, just sometimes. I pulled out my phone and read the 17 instances of comparison calmly. By the 5th, his face went pale. By the 10th, he couldn't look at me. By the 17th, the room felt heavy with the weight of what he'd done. In the second session, he finally admitted that he thought his ex was the one that got away. He said they broke up because of timing and that he always wondered what would have happened if things were different. The therapist asked if he wanted me to make him feel the way he felt back then, and he nodded, his face full of shame. I told him it was impossible because he was 24 then and wasn't grieving a past life yet. In my own therapy sessions, I learned that I'd normalized disappointment. I'd turned criticism into motivation, comparison into self-improvement, and emotional neglect into patience. My therapist called it accepting crumbs while starving for nourishment. In the third session, the therapist asked what it would take for me to consider reconciliation. I told her I needed to know I wasn't a project, a stand-in, or a second choice. Mark said he saw me now, but I told him seeing me now wasn't the same as choosing me then. Trust, I said, comes from understanding why he almost lost me. There's 1 month left in the separation. Some days, I think we could rebuild something real, based on who we are now. Other days, I remember how light I felt when I stopped trying to win a competition I never signed up for. Mark asked me last night what I was leaning towards. I truthfully said I didn't know yet, and it's the first honest answer I've given in years that wasn't shaped by fear. The envelope I left wasn't just separation papers. It was a boundary, a refusal, a declaration that I deserve to be chosen, not compared. Whether it's a new version of us or an entirely new life, I'll decide. But one thing is certain, I will never compete with a ghost again. I will never be grateful for criticism disguised as honesty, and I will never mistake being tolerated for being loved. 1 month left, and we'll see which life I choose.